Welcome to A Year in the Bible with Daily Grace. The Bible tells one big story of redemption, and we want to spend 5 minutes every day journeying through the Bible from start to finish and exploring how all of it points to Jesus. Hey, welcome back to A Year in the Bible with Daily Grace. This is Joanna Kimbrell, and I am so happy to be your host through the incredible book of Genesis. Now, yesterday, we heard that the Lord told Abraham that he was going to destroy the city of Sodom. And in chapter 19, we see that event play out. Sodom was a city notorious for horrible sin, sexual sin, abuse, violence, and oppression, just to name a few. And while those who are abused often go unseen, the Lord sees and hears their cries, and he moves in righteousness and justice. The two angels from chapter 18 went into the city of Sodom. Now remember, Abraham's brother Lot lived in Sodom, and he invited them into his home. But things turned dark really quickly. Soon, every man in all of Sodom swarmed Lot's home in a mob of sexual aggression to try to take the men by force. This is a clear picture of the kind of wickedness that the Lord was coming to judge. Now, Lot tries to stop them, but sadly, he offers up his own 2 daughters for them to do with as they wish. So much sin. So the Sodomites were enraged that Lot would call them out on their sin, and so they began to attack him and try to break down the door. But praise the Lord, the angels intervened. They pulled Lot inside and made all the men blind. So the angels urged Lot to get out of there because God was going to destroy the city. But Lot was taking his sweet time. He tried to stay. Now the angels could have left him to burn, but in God's amazing grace, they grabbed him by the hand and dragged him out of the city. Lot is saved. But why? He was horribly sinful too. He tried to give his daughters over to be abused. And then later he ends up drinking to the point that he impregnates his 2 daughters. But God's grace is not based on our failures. Lot was able to be called righteous Lot, not because of what he did, but because of his imperfect faith in God. Just as Abraham believed God and his faith was counted as righteousness, such is the case for Lot. It's also the case for us. We are all subject to the wrath of God for our sin, but if we trust in Jesus, we are declared righteous by his blood. So we've seen Abraham's faith grow for the past several chapters, but now he falls again into old sin. Abraham goes to Gerar and again lies by saying that Sarah is his sister. Abraham thought it was up to him to protect himself instead of trusting in the God who promised him a child. So she ends up in Abimelech's house, and by God's grace, God intervenes before Abimelech touches her. Even in Abraham's countless failures, God doesn't change his mind. He will be faithful to his promises. In the very next chapter after this massive failure, God fulfills his promise. When Abraham was 100 years old, God gave Abraham and Sarah a child, just as he said he would. Abraham and Sarah once laughed at the thought of God giving a postmenopausal woman and an old man a baby, but now they are filled with joyful laughter at the birth of Isaac. When Isaac was weaned around 3 years old, 17-year-old Ishmael also laughed, but this was out of scorn. Sarah became angry at Ishmael's mocking, and Abraham sent Ishmael and Hagar away once again to the wilderness. Now they quickly ran out of food and water to the point that they were in danger of dying. The grieved Hagar left Ishmael under a tree and went off in a distance so that she wouldn't have to watch her son die. But then something amazing happened. God heard. The God who saw her in the previous wilderness is also the God who sees her and draws near to rescue. Ishmael's name means God hears. And the angel of the Lord restates the promise that Ishmael would be a great nation and opened her eyes to see a well of water. This chapter ends with an interaction between Abimelech and Abraham. Abraham's last interaction with Abimelech was a shameful one, in which God revealed Abraham's deceit to Abimelech in claiming that Sarah was his sister. But now in chapter 21, the redemptive work of God in Abraham's life is evident as Abimelech approaches Abraham in respect. Abimelech's admiration is not because of anything Abraham has done, but how the Lord has worked through him. He saw that God was with him in everything he did and desired to make a covenant with Abraham. They made a covenant of peace with one another on that day. And the text introduces another name of God, El Olam, the everlasting God. He has no beginning and no end. While humans change and the world changes, God is steadfast and unchanging. He will never abandon his people, his plans, or his promises. Isaac was the long-expected, long-hoped-for child that came at exactly the right time. But his birth points to another birth. In the fullness of time, at the exact moment that God ordained, after thousands of years of waiting, Jesus Christ was born. He is the true child of promise. He is the miraculously born offspring of Eve and of Abraham who would redeem God's people at last. Even now, we are waiting for his second coming. The waiting is long, but laughter is on the horizon. He will come in God's perfect timing to redeem and restore all that was lost. He will wipe away every tear from our weary eyes. May God grant us faith in the waiting.